Hi there, and welcome to my latest episode of Cool People. Now, over the last 2 years or so, during my transition, I've met all sorts of amazing people because I've been doing trans awareness training and public speaking. And so because I've been on the equality and diversity circuit, basically. And so I've met all these other amazing people with incredible stories to tell. And so I just thought that I would just share some of my friends with you. And so that's why I've got this series called Cool People. Now, today's cool person is a very cool person. Her name is Jackie Handy, and she's a speaker, trainer, and author. She's even done a TED Talk, so that shows the calibre of her. So, welcome, Jackie.
Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you for having me. Gosh, no pressure. That's a big old build-up. I should probably say there was a little X after the TED. It wasn't the big stage in America, but I'd done a TEDx talk.
It was a brilliant talk, though. So yeah, well done on that. So brilliant. So Jackie, I just wondered if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gosh, where to start? Yeah, well, as you've already said, I work in the training and professional speaking space now, and I authored a book a couple of years ago, actually about recruitment, because that was my background. It took me, I've been over 20 years now in the corporate space, and it took me, I think as it does, a long time to really find my positioning and find my niche. Things were quite different when I was growing up. Firstly, I suppose I was I was an only child, and so I had no siblings. And I know I'm not alone in that. And but it brings a different dynamic to your early family years. I had very loving parents. I still have very loving parents, thankfully. And but they, we struggled a bit financially as a family. So it was a quite a tough upbringing, if you like, from a financial perspective. My mum is Catholic, and I found that when I was growing up, I used to get bullied by the other children in the street. So I'd previously played very happily with them. And then by the time we got to going to school age, and I was the only child going off to a Catholic school, suddenly that difference was highlighted where there hadn't been a difference before. And so I got bullied, I got name called, the usual. Sadly, kids are cruel, and it was a tough time for a little while. But I think the other thing about children is they bounce back. They're very resilient. There is something about us that we hold on to some of those early life experiences, but nevertheless we bounce back, and I did. And I was a popular kid at school, and when I was kind of 11 or 12, my mum and dad were self-employed. They used to work on market stalls, and I used to go along and help them at the weekend. And I even had a little market stall of my own that my dad helped me with when I was about 12 or 13. Yeah, so I'm sure I used to sell things purely because some of the older people felt sorry for me and would buy things for £1 off my stall. So, I mean, I had, it was an interesting time, and I was very much, kind of brought up with the concept of, you work hard, you work for what you get, and so I think with that mindset of achieving and knowing that it's not just going to be gifted to you, you need to really put in the effort. So that was interesting. And I got to, 14, 15. I usually say to people, I can't remember the exact date. I put a label on it because, truth be told, I'd probably been feeling that way for many years prior. But I think by the time I kind of hit those mid-teenage years, I realised that, a bit like back in the day when I was going off to a different school, I realised I was different again. And this time it was because, of course, I wasn't feeling like the other girls in my class. I wasn't feeling like I was fancying boys. I was feeling like I was fancying girls, and this was a real inner battle for me. And you know, anybody, it doesn't matter what your difference is, but any difference that you feel, experience, believe, to identify as having, that is socially less acceptable than other differences, if you like, creates a real inner battle. And of course, I've already mentioned my mum was Catholic, and there's a reason for that, right? Because of course, homosexuality is illegal, not illegal, but it's considered a sin in the Catholic faith. So I was really concerned that I was going to, if I continued on this path, and by the way, as you know, when it's not a path that you'd ever choose. It's a path that you just feel and you know is your path. Yeah. And so I realized that the consequence of remaining on this path that felt like, although conflicted, it felt the right path for me. I risked losing the people that I loved the most in my life, and that was extremely scary. Yeah, an extremely scary place.
It is.
Yeah. And I won't go into it all today with you, but I didn't exactly come out of the closet. I had my closet door well and truly opened, and I was pulled out of it, really. But where it came from is that my parents had quite simply noticed that my behaviour was changing, and the fact that I was perhaps being a little bit more cheeky and irritable than the usual teenager. And of course, I had no siblings either, so my parents didn't have a comparison child to kind of go, oh yeah, this is normal behaviour for a teenager, or it's not. But they just recognised that there was something different in my character, and they were right. You know, at school, funnily enough, I had confided in a couple of close friends, and although many of my friends were supportive, the word spread, and many of the other kids in the school were not. And so that bullying that I'd experienced back in, the street where I lived had started again, and so there's name calling and laughter and all the rest of it. And talking of behavioural shifts, this kind of once very extroverted individual had withdrawn a little bit. And I even hit a boy in school one day, and I tell this story in my TEDx talk, don't I? If for anyone that's watched it, in that I say that it's the day that premenstrual tension met homophobia and lost. I hit this guy because he just picked on me on a day where, maybe it was the time of the month, I don't know, but something in me just snapped, and it was enough now. This is unfair, it's unkind, and I can't deal with this anymore. And so I was so happy that my parents, now anyway, that my parents had not only noticed a change in my behaviour, but that they had confronted me about it. Because I sometimes wonder what might have happened if they hadn't approached me about it. And after a reasonably heated discussion, when I then sort of came out of the closet, we somehow came to a place that was built on foundations of love, and I will forever be very thankful for that, and it remains the case today. Sadly, I know that many people aren't so lucky as to have such acceptance, and I guess what it taught me is that you can, if you have strong religious beliefs or strong values and other belief systems, then you can still find ways to reconcile that with the love for those closest to you. It's all about choice, and very often when there are strong feelings and strong beliefs and strong emotions at play, we don't recognise the choice. It feels like it's been taken away from us. But really, if we have the opportunity to reflect and look back, we do realise that we've always got choice in how we respond in situations. And so that was kind of the early life story. Moving on, it wasn't always easy. I think it's really important to say that, the foundations were there, but the depth of understanding as to, what it meant to be gay, when it started for me to feel this way. Was it a phase? My mother asked. 30 odd years later, she's still waiting for me to come out of it.
It's still in the phase.
But still a phase, yeah. It's just a really long phase, Mike. But so this sort of depth of understanding of, what did we do something wrong as parents? I mentioned no siblings, and so I wonder if I know that they doubted their parenting abilities for a while, and of course it was nothing whatsoever to do with any of that. I couldn't have had better parents, really. And so eventually, over time, again, I don't know what date, year it was, but eventually over time, we just found this place of mutual understanding and respect for who I was and our relationship, and life could move on. And really, the experience I had also reminds me to remind others that our orientation, our gender, our choices don't have to define us. Choices or just natural differences, they don't have to define us. I am much more than my orientation, so much more. Yeah. And it is, I don't want to be known as, Jackie the lesbian, that's just happens to be part of me, but I would rather much more be recognized for, Jackie the person that inspires me, or Jackie the person that helps me learn something. And she just happens to be a lesbian, it's just another thing. And so throughout my sort of early adulthood, I did lots of jobs, as we do when we're finding our path. And one of the big early jobs I did, I was a holiday rep for 4 years. And it was, back in the days where holiday reps used to have lots of fun, lots of parties, free drinks, and all the rest of it. And I actually found that a very enlightening experience, because I love to travel, I love to meet people of different, nationalities, cultures, etc. But also, I also found it quite challenging because, and I'm talking very stereotypically now, but stereotypically in the holiday repping world, the girls are man-eaters, and the boys are gay. And that's, sweeping generalizations, but, my experience is that those kind of characteristics, if you like, differences, they go with that kind of territory, or they certainly did 25 years ago.
They did, yeah.
And of course, I didn't really fit the mold out there. So I actually found that for the first couple of years, I remained in the closet again, because I was worried about how that might affect my opportunities, my friendships. I just was very, not uncertain about who I was, but having been bullied previously in my life, in different parts of my life, I decided just to remain tight-lipped about who I was in terms of my identity. So I worked hard, but eventually, and I was actually pretty good holiday rep. You can probably tell, Katie, I'm shy and retiring. So
very shy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I met lots of great people. It turns out I was a good salesperson and a good entertainer, and eventually, gradually, I suppose somehow by osmosis, I came out of the closet, and at that point in my life, 22, 23, people were saying, yeah, we knew. And it started to dawn on me that actually, there will be certain things, whether it's because I don't partake in the conversations and the relationships with men, whether it's because, how I wear my hair or how I carry myself, whatever it is. But, the signs are there. And so I realized that a bit of authenticity was needed, and it felt better that way. And I have to say, I was very much embraced at that point. So that started to make things okay. It's going to be okay moving forward. But I do think as well that our early experiences, no matter how we try to fight them, they stay with us. They form our deep values, our belief systems about ourselves and perhaps about the world. And so even though I'd had that really positive experience, I still found it hard to come out of the closet again in subsequent roles. And I remember sort of 4 years into being a holiday rep, I came back. My mum and dad had said, look, maybe you should think about getting a proper job. I turned 25, and, it was in the days where you could buy a property quite easily. And my parents said, look, you should maybe save and get yourself a deposit and get on the housing ladder, and you'll need a proper job for that. So I remember coming back to the UK, stepping off a plane. I mean, not literally, but, almost stepping off a plane, walking into a job agency and saying, hi, I get on really well with people and I can sell. Have you got any jobs for me? And they said, you're hired, pretty much. And so therein lay my next journey into the world of recruitment consultancy. And not with that particular company, but I stayed within the recruitment world for the next 15 or so years. I still work with recruitment companies now. Once again, went through that whole kind of in the closet, now out of the closet. I met my now wife 12, 13 years ago, not at work, but, whilst I was working in one company. And I think the sort of solid nature of that relationship gave me the confidence to just say, look, I don't know what age I was, probably about coming into 30s, early 30s now. And it was like, God, come on, mid 30s even. How long do I just hide myself? I am who I am. And that didn't mean that I suddenly wore rainbow flags and, dyed my hair all colours of the rainbow and whatever. But, it was that I finally perhaps felt comfortable with just being me. And I think when we can find that place, and it's definitely within ourselves first, God, the world is transformed for us, I stayed in recruitment for many years, as I said. And interestingly, because, of course, at the time of this recording, we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. And it will be so interesting, actually, to see how the world changes on the back of that.
Yeah.
But on the reason I mention it at this stage is that I went through the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, 2007, 2008. When I was working in recruitment, I was managing others at that point. And I tell you this because at that point, my role had to change because it just wasn't the same. People weren't buying. It's a bit like now, perhaps, but people weren't buying. So I had to look at what can I do differently? How can I keep my team motivated? And so I became a bit of an accidental coach, really. And I turned out to be quite good at it. And long story short, I decided that I wanted to do more of this and give back a little bit more and help others learn and feel motivated. So I moved into learning and development. That was 10 years ago. 6 years ago, I launched my own consultancy. and then gradually what's happened, and it's so interesting because I really believe that our life's work brings us to exactly right where we are now and where we're supposed to be. If we look hard enough, we see that the signs were always there. And so now what I do is I speak to people about diversity and inclusion, but through creating inclusive workspaces, through adopting the correct behaviours that will help people come out of themselves, feel safe, be comfortable about opening up. And I know, everyone talks about bring your whole self to work, and it's becoming a bit of a cliche now, but I there's something in that. And I think
very true.
And I think actually my approach to diversity and inclusion is less about, let's make sure that we're, we know what it means to be LGBT or what it means to be an ethnic minority or blah, 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 but more about let's recognize what we all need as human beings. And let's think about, rather than looking at silos and saying, right, okay, so if I'm speaking to somebody that's transgender, are there ways that I should address them, etc.? Well, of course there are. But they are, I believe, and maybe you can help me with this, but I believe that you, Katie, you are you. You are uniquely you. So actually, if I said to you, look, as a transgender woman, how should I address you and what should I say? Then you can still only speak from your unique perspective. And sorry.
I just say, call me Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so for example, if I asked a particular individual who is a wheelchair user, if I'm greeting you, should I stand or should I come down to the level that you're at so that we're on an equal, in an equal playing field? Then that person might say, oh yes, come down to me because I prefer that. But that might not be representative of the whole of the community that uses a wheelchair. And so my belief is, yes, let's be mindful of some of these differences that we should be aware of. But more importantly, let's be mindful that everybody's a human being and deserves a level of respect and deserves to be heard and deserves to be understood.
It's like pronouns. A lot of people worry about what pronouns to use, and I always say to people, well, if you're not sure, then just ask somebody what their pronouns are.
Just ask.
And so trans people, we like to be asked which pronouns to use because it shows that you care and there's a willingness to get it right, and that
absolutely,
that in itself is enough, to be honest. And even then, if you get it wrong, because you've only known me as Katie, whereas some of my older friends who have previously known me as Martin for many years, every now and again they'll slip up and call me Martin or say he or him. And if that person is 100% supportive, then if they slip up every now and again, that does not bother me at all, and I don't get cross about it at all.
Absolutely.
The only time I do get cross about it is if somebody does it consistently and deliberately, because then obviously that's abuse. That's a different thing. But if I know that they're supportive and they've just slipped up, it's not a big deal. They beat themselves up about it, but I don't. I don't beat them up.
That's it. And another person who was transgender might say, I get very offended by that. So I think, and I'm with you on this. At the end of the day, I genuinely believe that people are fundamentally good. And, sometimes good people make bad decisions and sometimes good people do bad things. But I do believe that people are fundamentally good. And I believe that people fundamentally want to be inclusive. They just don't always know how. And so, and that's the understanding and education point that I look to focus on in the work that I do. And I think once we have more of that. Sorry, Katie.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do with the trans side of things as well. And obviously, I'm focusing just on the trans side of things. But yeah, it's exactly that. I find that more. I mean, yes, there's a certain section of society who are very transphobic, and we all know about them. and often whatever you say isn't going to change their mind anyway. But I find that the majority of the people I'm talking to are people who actually do want to get it right, but just lack the education. And so that's where I can help them. So it's exactly
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Same page. And I think it's so interesting that it's, transphobic, homophobic. It's, was it Morgan Freeman that said there's no such thing as, it's not a phobia, but that's a fear. It's being an asshole, I think he says, something like that. But, just, there will always be those people. And I think we generally, I hope, can say that they are in the minority. And, it's like anything, isn't it? It's success breeds success. And I think, if you can influence, what I try and do is to try and help people understand, not by sort of dictating rules, probably like you, not by dictating rules, but by telling stories, by sharing experiences, and to help people realize that in order to include, we have to realize how we learn to exclude. And, because by recognizing the power of our words, I mean, I've studied language as well as part of, my adult studies. I've become an NLP master practitioner and trainer. And actually a big part of that for people think that NLP is all kind of woo-woo hypnosis and whatever. Actually, NLP is how we consciously use language and the influence that language has on our own state and the state of others. And so I'm very mindful of how language influences those around us as well as ourselves. And words matter, words matter, and actions do have consequences. And so I'm a massive advocate for diversity, in that there's so much brilliance that comes out in the world when we are more diverse. And but we have to make sure that everybody's voice is heard and that everybody's opinion is respected, regardless of where they come from. And it's taken that whole journey that I've gone through, my whole life story, really in sort of 20 minutes or whatever, to tell you how I got to that point. Yeah. And I know you're calling this cool people. I don't feel particularly cool. I feel like really I'm just drawn to make a difference. And, I'm driven now to truly leave a positive mark on this world in the way in which people behave with one another and interact and support one another. And I did mention a moment ago that, at this time of recording, we're experiencing the global pandemic of COVID-19, and I really think that actually on the back of it, yes, there will be sadness, there will be anxiety, and there will be devastation for many in many different parts of their lives. I do truly believe that when we get through it, and we will, that the world could just be that little bit better a place for it. What I'm noticing in this current climate is, despite, yes, many people are in isolation, and we're being told not to travel and all that unnecessarily, which is quite right. But people more than ever, the barriers are breaking down naturally. There's almost just a humanity is coming through, and good and bad, but mainly good, in that we don't care whether that person's black or in a wheelchair or transgender or gay or older than us or younger than us. We just care that there is another human being to the left of us and to the right of us, and we're looking out for that person. We're checking in on that person, and we're supporting, if we can, that person. And that's what inclusion is. And I think COVID-19, bizarrely, is working temporarily or possibly with longer term impact to make us a more inclusive world without us even realizing.
Yeah. And I think we're all sort of coming together to fight this common enemy, COVID-19. And, you sort of see it with that's all sort of putting notes through neighbours' doors, sort of saying, look, if you need help getting your shopping or whatever, just give us a call. Here's the phone numbers and all that sort of thing, and that's all going on. And there's WhatsApp groups for the streets and things, and we've got it all going on here, and it's been great. And I've been helped, like with my mum. My mum's 83. She lives down in Kent. I'm in Leicestershire. I can't help her like do a shopping or anything. I tried going online to do shopping online. We tried to get slots for online shopping. You just can't do it. So I'm having to rely on people down there volunteering to get a shopping for her. But we're all just helping each other, and I think that can only be a good thing. And hopefully,
almost definitely.
Hopefully, people will forget about anything else, or labels and whatever. I think labels are overrated. We're all just people.
Agreed.
We're all just people at the end of the day, aren't we?
Well, yeah, and like you said, just call me Katie. And I said in the TEDx talk I delivered, the only label I want to be remembered by is my name. That's the only label that I identify with. It's my name. That's it. Just call me Jackie. That's it.
Absolutely. And okay, I know obviously I bang on about sort of trans stuff all the time, because obviously that's what I'm trying to do in terms of getting more acceptance for trans people, and there's a big job to be done still. We're getting there, but there's still a lot more to do. But the big point I get across to people, that I'm exactly the same person that I was before. I've got the same skills, the same experience, the same sense of humour, however warped that is, and the same sense of integrity. Everything is the same. Okay, I look different, I've got a different name, but the big difference is I'm happier. And
that's right.
Being able to live your truth is amazing, isn't it? It just feels incredible. And it goes back to the bring your whole self to work thing. If you can be yourself at work, you can be so much more productive. It's just so much more beneficial. Brilliant. So,
100%.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you were saying about where you sort of, when you went to a new job, you go back in the closet again. And I've heard that so many times from people, where they feel that they can't be themselves at work, and then you have to come out all over again. So it's interesting that you brought that point up. So
that's it. That's it. And I know the world is changing, as you rightly say, but there are lots of times where I find that perhaps some of the much younger generation, they sort of perhaps are much more accepting of difference. To a degree, yes, I would run with that. Mm-hmm. But I think that we also have to appreciate that everybody has a story, and their as I said before, their early experiences, their belief systems, and their values about self and the world, they influence how we act, how we think, and how we behave. So I think it is still difficult. I am much more comfortable in what I do. I'm much more open about the whole of who I am, but only if I need to be. And by the way, I also feel like really one of the lucky ones. There's so many people that I talk to that are of my sort of age, maybe a bit older, maybe a bit younger, that have been hugely rejected by their family and their close loved ones, and have some of whom have never had the opportunity to reconcile before that parent or that loved one has passed away. And I just think, wow, I daren't think about how the path of my life could have been so much different, but for the response and the love and the unwavering support from my parents, and I'll always be thankful for that.
That's so good to hear. It really is. Yeah. Yeah, I've got friends who have lost their entire families through this. I've lost my sister through this, and
I know.
And I've had my struggles with my mum, and she's getting there. But the trouble is, she's got dementia now, and that's taken over really. So I know she's always going to call me Martin.
Well, and there are certain things like that, that I'm starting to learn. My mum's recently been diagnosed, starting to learn that it's bloody cruel disease, isn't it?
Oh,
and but we forgive mistakes and repetition and all these kind of things on the basis of this awful disease. Really, it's it's a horrible thing. But so I get where you're coming from, for sure.
But now, I mean, I think she was just starting to sort of accept it, but now her dementia's got a lot worse, and I just think, I need to just give in to that. That's a battle that's not worth fighting. I just need to accept that that's what it is, and
right.
I still love her. She's still my mum.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And you'll always be her child, right? So that doesn't change. That doesn't change. And hey, if she misgenders you due to the dementia, so be it.
I know that I know that it's the dementia talking, so that's how I cope with it myself. But it's the dementia talking, and it's not harm meant by it. So, yeah.
Exactly, and that's the thing that we talked about with others, isn't it? People make mistakes, and it's not the case in your mum's situation, because that's an illness related, of course. But people do make mistakes around us, and we shouldn't hold that against them. Because we all make mistakes, we all get it wrong sometimes.
Sure.
And so yes, it's an interesting world, but it's a wonderfully diverse world, and if only more people would just embrace the power of humanity, really, in all its forms, then there's so many possibilities.
Absolutely. And I think definitely the point that you picked up on, I think just through storytelling alone is just so powerful. I thank you so much for telling your story today, because it's brilliant, because it shows the journey that you've been on, and it shows that you're so much more than just a sexuality, and just as I'm so much more than being trans. But we're all just people, and got fascinating stories. So thanks ever so much.
Yes, we are. And thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you for having me and for listening. I hope I hope it will give some support, maybe some insight to your viewers. But it's been a real pleasure, Katie. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. And thanks ever so much for watching, and please catch up with me again on the next edition of Cool People.